Welcome to Leadership from the Cross with Pastor Scott Thom. This broadcast is devoted to taking your ministry and life to the next level. No matter what the level you are at, let us help advance your leadership skills. Leadership from the Cross is a ministry of Cross Christian Fellowship in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And now, Pastor Scott Thom.
Working with people is difficult. Ministry is messy. And I don't mean that it generates a lot of trash. Ministry does do that, but working in ministry means you are dealing with people who are not in your world, and we're not in theirs necessarily. We're in the family of God, right? But we come from so many different backgrounds and ideals and makeups, and here we are coming together to bless people in ministry, and it gets messy. People clash in ministry. We have difficulty with ministry leaders and in counseling situations and board meetings, and feelings can get hurt. We need to know how to approach a person with an issue and do it when there's a conflict going on. And I'm not talking just about like Matthew 18, somebody's sinning against you. I'm talking about normal, routine, business, ministry, personal interaction that just isn't clicking. And you've got to go tell somebody that the way they're doing something is not going to work, or how they're doing worship needs to change, or the activity that they're doing is detrimental to themselves and the people around them in ministry. Sometimes it's an intervention type of thing. Sometimes it's conflict resolution, but it's something that has to be done. How do we handle difficult conversations? That's what I want to talk about today. This is something they just don't teach you in school. You might get some wise teacher or somebody who kind of takes you under their wing, or somebody who's very gracious and kind of demonstrates it for you. But for the most part, we don't know how to handle this. And it takes a lot of tact, a lot of wisdom to handle these difficult conversations. So what should we do when that ministry leader is not following what you asked him to do? When somebody underneath you in ministry is not following the program, or somebody is doing their own thing, when somebody is causing others to stumble, and you know you've got to go talk to them, but you're like, man, I do not like confrontation. Who does? Very few people do, right? So we put it off, but we know we have to do it. And many times that just gets things in a conflict that's even worse. So we have to do it. There's a number of steps that we need to take for this to come about. Let me go through a few, and you're going to find your own balance in these, but these are good points to bring out and think about and to go over when you have to make a difficult conversation come to pass. So the first thing, obviously, is to pray, but not just to pray willy-nilly. You've got to pray for sound understanding, a non-biasness or impartiality, and wisdom. You need to know the real issue and not be biased. In Proverbs 18:13, it says, "He who answers a matter before he hears it, it is folly and shame to him." To answer a matter before you hear it. That's folly. It's foolishness. And you oftentimes are going to get ashamed. Because sometimes you go in and, we can go in, we can blast on this one area, and that's not even what's going on with the person. They're hurt because we didn't fulfill a promise, or something's going on at home, or they just lost their boyfriend or their girlfriend, or having trouble with, physically, they're sick, they're going through things, they're struggling financially, and we go in and blast them. We don't even know what's going on with them. Man, we can have egg on our face really fast. So you pray, Lord, show me, give me sound understanding, give me wisdom in these areas. Then search out the matter with people. And when you sit down with them, don't just start with the problem area. Go, hey, thank them. I'm glad you're here. We love your ministry. We love what you're doing. But I have some questions. I really need to hear from your side. What's going on with this area? I really want to know what you're thinking, what's happening in your ministry or in your life, and just continue to ask questions. Even if you think you know the answers, ask the questions. Proverbs 25:2 says, it's the glory of God to conceal a matter, but the glory of kings is to search out a matter. See, many times God will hide certain things from the public because he doesn't want people embarrassed. God is a gentleman. But it matters to the overseer. And he may need to know these things, but not everybody. So it's important for you to get in there and find out how they're doing, not pushing too hard. I mean, if they don't want to open up, they don't want to open up. But you've got to get in there and ask a lot of questions. Because if we just think we know it all and we start firing, that's not smart. Proverbs 13:10 says, by pride comes nothing but strife, but with the well-advised is wisdom. When you ask a lot of questions instead of firing at them, when you bring them in and they know there's something going on and there's conflict going on, but when you don't come accusatory at the very beginning, it puts people at ease. And one thing it does is it gives dignity to the person. They don't feel defensive immediately, and it opens conversation. You want to give dignity to that person, even if they've been really kind of a thorn in the flesh. Allow that person to have that dignity because each person is made in the image of God. And then be empathetic, right? Feel for them. Put yourself in their shoes. Just kind of see, well, you know what? What they said was kind of harsh or did this or whatever. But, after the way they were treated, now that I know more information, I find out that that person was snarky to begin with or did something on one of the social media accounts or was undermining the authority of this ministry leader and why they treated that person like this. It may not be right, but, at least I can understand why they snapped. And they just need to grow in this area. Instead of blasting them, this is an opportunity to teach. And then always remember the golden rule. You would want to be treated with dignity, with support, allowing you to share your side. And then you're more open, right? Well, okay, I got to share my side and got these things out. And then if that person comes and straightens you out or, helps you move on from that incident, at least you feel like they care. And they didn't just jump to a conclusion. I mean, this includes finding a matter out, getting confirmation. So somebody comes to you and says, hey, this and this is going on. You better jump on this. And this is horrible. And these people, what happens is you're in leadership or in business or whatever. And somebody comes to you and says, oh, this is terrible. This is going on. And it gets you riled up. And immediately you want to go, I'm going to go talk to that person. And what happens is a lot of times it's overinflated because the other person's hyped up. It just happened. Emotions are high. And oftentimes it's not as bad as you think. And oftentimes it's not as bad as you think because the person, because emotions are running high, kind of exaggerate a little bit. You know what I mean? We all can do it from time to time, right? We're the victim. And so we want to make people sympathize with us. And so we make the trial more serious than it really is, and that poor me, and these things are going on. And so make sure you get confirmation. This reminds me when way back in California, we were at a large church at the ministry, and there was an individual who was teaching in a home group. And I began to hear rumors coming out. That person was teaching a doctrine that we did not teach or agree with at the church. And everybody knew this, that this was not the stance that we took and that we take on this doctrine. And on some things you can, it's no big deal, right? Because certain things are not major. Don't major in the minors. But this was a major doctrine. And we didn't agree with what he was teaching, and basically was trying to take over this ministry, and not just that one cell group, but trying to get other cell group leaders or other home church leaders to teach the same thing. And it spilled over into our ushers ministry. But I had to know for sure. So I called the home study group. I called the home fellowship leaders, the host family, and I just asked them, hey, how's it going? I didn't come out all, hey, I hear these rumors coming out. I just said, hey, how you doing? We want to thank you because you're hosting for this home church, and you guys are a blessing. And how you doing? How's it going there? And you know what? They confirmed it without me having to ask. And matter of fact, they told me, they said, man, this is perfect time. We've been praying. How do we talk to Pastor Scott and let him know that this is going on in a ministry he's overseeing temporarily? And we really didn't know how to handle it, if we should call you, not call you. But things were getting a little testy, and there was argumentations going on every week over this doctrine. And every week we weren't going over what we were supposed to be going over. But every week we were going over this doctrine and whether we believed it or not. And it's really getting out of control. And so we're hoping that you would handle it. And oftentimes, and why you open up with a question or two is because the person themselves will confirm it. So if I have confirmation, I don't even lead off with that. Like, hey, I know this is going on because I've got multiple confirmations from people. I just sit down and I go, what's going on? And I'll tell you this, and you'll know this if you've been in ministry any time at all. People who have an axe to grind will oftentimes reveal that axe. They will bring it out because they want to chop here or chop there. If they have an axe to grind, then sooner or later you're going to see that axe. And it's just something that they're going to grind it in front of you. And it eventually comes to a head. And that's what happened. So I set the person down and I said, well, I've got to have this conversation. So I said, hey, come on in. Hey, thanks. You're leading this group or whatever. How's it going with the group? And how's it? Well, what are you asking? Well, I just wanted to pull you in and talk to you. I mean, you've been doing this for a little while. And frankly, I mean, we've heard a few things, but instead of just jumping to conclusions, I'd really like to hear what you're thinking and what's going on there. And so it wasn't but a few sentences later, well, I wholeheartedly disagree. You guys are not teaching the truth, and you're not. All right. So you've got to move on at that point. Talk to the person, and there's a certain amount that, and by move on, I'm saying that at this point, part of the conversation is going to be not just saying, here's what we believe. It's like, here's what we believe. And if you can't fall in line, we understand you are open to hold whatever belief you want. We're not thought leaders, thought controllers type of thing, but we do have a responsibility in our ministry of who teaches. And you're not allowed to teach in our church if you're going to go off on these main doctrines. You also want to pray these things for both sides, that God work in wisdom, He show confirmation, because people can come and you can ask them, hey, I just need to talk to you for a bit. Are you open? Do you have some time after service or whatever? And sometimes God is already working in their heart and they're like, I know what you want to talk about. I'm so sorry. And it's already, you're like, oh man, God, you did such a wonderful work. Because remember, Proverbs 21:1 says, the king's heart is in the hand of the Lord, like rivers of water. He turns it wherever he wishes. Because God is so good, he can begin working the whole thing out from the beginning. So you pray for sound understanding, non-partiality, so don't get too biased, don't get emotions going too far. Pray for wisdom, that God show you what you should see, what you should say. And then you want to, the second part here, you want to seek counsel, but only with reputable, faithful people. It says that there's wisdom in a multitude of counselors. But let me counsel you on this. Don't go air other people's dirty laundry in front of a bunch of counselors. Only one or two who are really reputable and faithful, who aren't seeking harm for people or to be a gossip. They're not in a power struggle. They'd rather not hear this than hear it. Because if you seek counsel and you spill the beans on everything to a lot of people, you're only going to make everything worse. Proverbs 17:9 says, he who covers a transgression seeks love, but he who repeats a matter separates friends. You don't want to separate people. You're trying to redeem the situation. You're trying to build on the situation. You're trying to have a difficult conversation for a redeemable end. Proverbs 11:13 says this, a talebearer reveals secrets, but he who is of a faithful spirit conceals a matter. So if you're going to talk with people, only choose one or two who are very wise in this. That's why in Matthew 18, it talks about only bring one or two individuals, one or two witnesses. That's all you need. You don't want to overdo it. And if you can, talk to people who don't even know the person. That way, see, your responsibility is to protect that person and their reputation, not destroy it, not make your case so they only see it your way. You want to lay out, hey, here's what's going on. What do you think I should do? Is there questions I should ask this person? Is there something I'm not seeing here? But the point here is that you want wise counsel without tainting people's hearts. You want them not to be feeling bad or feeling awkward when they're in front of that person or by that person, so that they can still minister to that person. And hopefully they don't even know the person. So you want to contact somebody in another state or someone completely different and say, here's what's going on. What do you think? Sometimes you can't. Sometimes you can't keep it this way. Their sin or their grievance continues to come up even long after they've left, or certain things happen. I try as much as possible to keep it low key. From time to time when we have students and I'm mentoring guys, that they don't always have the same doctrine, and I don't really expect that. And I tell them, look, you don't have to believe exactly as I believe, but I ask that you don't cause disunity and interrupt the school. Well, every now and then you get a student that does that. And I had a student who came in on probation because he was locked into a certain doctrine of salvation, and this is the only true doctrine. Everybody else who believes it, I don't even think they're saved unless they believe this. And I'm saying, look, can you wait just to the sixth quarter? Sixth quarter, we're going to take the whole quarter and go over this. And at that time, you can ask any question you want. But at this point, I don't want to see you arguing with people on it. Just wait. Just wait. And he agreed to that. But he didn't keep his agreement. He didn't keep his word. And so outside the church. There was, at a church function, he was arguing with somebody, and I kind of brought it down and said, look, you promised you weren't going to bring this up. I know, but it's just so important. I can't believe you teach this. I'm like, look, just wait. But then again, at school, in the hallway, arguing with somebody, yelling at somebody, I'm like, no, you can't do that. Again, later on the third time, I said, look, I'm going to kick you out if you don't stop this, because you gave me your word you wouldn't make this an opportunity to cause division, and that you would wait till we got there. And I promised that I would answer any questions at that time. Well, he left disgruntled. But instead of just leaving and saying, well, I'm not going to be part of this church, not going to be part of this college, he sent an email out to every one of the students telling the individuals that he didn't agree with the teaching. That's okay. But then he left it wide open, making suggestions that I was in some kind of multitude or multiple sins that disqualified me, but not naming them, just alluding to them. Well, that got the students all riled up. And so I had to have a rebuttal letter and email letter, because you just kind of have to respond. I didn't blow it up beyond that, and not to anybody else, not to the church, not to anybody else, just to set the record straight. And actually, I had to come in with the class, the next class session, and open up to anybody. You can ask any question. We're going to go through this, and then it's going to be done with. And if you choose to leave, then God bless you. We're not going to think any worse of you, but you can leave if you choose to do that. If you don't agree with us, that's fine. You don't have to agree with everything, but don't cause division if you're here. It's just not godly to do that. And so we went through it, and then I said, hey, when we're done, we're done. Did everybody understand? And they were like, yeah, and I can't believe this, and I can't believe that person. I said, look, they're not here, and they're not going to be here. We're going to love on them, but no bashing this person anymore. But also no giving them leeway to continue to spread rumors and lies. Shut that down right away and tell the person you can't do that. Nor are we going to on our side. Just let it die now. And sometimes you have to have that. So seek counsel only from reputable, faithful people. When it gets public or it goes to those people, sometimes you have to address those people, everybody there, and say, hey, do you have any questions? Let's get it all on the table and be done with it. The third thing is write down the main points of contention so that you can have a clear process and steps to restoration. You want to have kind of a direction. And maybe you don't have to write it down, but for most people that helps them. But in your mind, have it really clear. Now, don't just write down sentences. Don't use the person's name. Don't let anybody see your notes, but just have a direction. Because what happens is you get into these conversations and it goes down all these other rabbit holes. Yeah, but not only this doctrine, but this doctrine and that and this here and she said and he said. Well, that's hearsay. I can't really deal with that right now, but I can deal with this one issue. And so you want to have clear direction in the conversation. These are the things I want to discuss with you today. We can discuss these other matters at another time if you want, but this is really what I have confirmation on. This is where we're going right now, and this is where we're going to stay. And in that on that notepad, you want to write something down of how are you going to redeem the situation if you can. How do you redeem the person? How can you build them up? And it won't always play out that way. You're going to get new information, but at least your mind's headed that way. How can you redeem the situation? Do we have to take this person out of ministry? Can we put them in another ministry for a while? Or can we just say, hey, 6 months, let's try again? Or can we put them in some training? Or could we just get them resources? Or could we just get them separated from another person in ministry? Or can we just bring those people together for a time of just sharing and getting on the same page and maybe attitude adjustment and some forgiveness. It just depends on the situation. I had a problem with a new believer instructor and their attitude. Our new believer instructors were there because in a very large church, a very evangelical church, we could get 30 people saved on a weekend easy. And we had 3 services. And so we had to have instructors and coordinators over every service, having 6, 7 services through the week because of the different outreaches and different things going on 3 on Sunday, Sunday afternoon, Sunday evening. We had a Korean church going on, Spanish church going on, Wednesday evenings, youth ministry. And so I had all these coordinators and all these new believer instructors that would take the individuals and would, when they got saved, would share with them, hey, we'd give them a Bible, read your Bible daily, prayer daily, and this is how it looks like and what you can do. And here's a relationship type that you're entering into with the Lord, and get into a good Bible teaching church. And they just counseled them in the basic discipleship. And we needed overseers that would schedule people, make sure Bibles were there for them, a number of other things. Well, there was this one coordinator that I had promoted. He came into the ministry. I knew that he was going to be used by the Lord mightily and that he was going to be leaving us soon to go plant a church. And so I promoted him very fast because he needed to get as much on his plate as possible to learn as much as possible. And I had a new believer instructor who had an attitude about this. And so I called him in, we sat down, we talked. I began to ask him, hey, what's going on with you and whatever. And, he busted me. He goes, you made a promise to make me a service coordinator as soon as the next opening was up. And I've been faithful and I wanted to do this. And I was like, man, you are so right. Here's the situation why I put this person in front of you, not because I'm dissatisfied with anything you're doing. And so I apologized with them. But it was a good time to sit him down and go, by the way, this is why we need to have difficult conversations and how you have difficult conversations, because had you just come to me originally, we wouldn't have these 2 months of you kind of backbiting and being down and everybody asking you what's wrong, but you won't tell them. So everybody thinks that there's a multitude of things wrong with you or with the ministry, with me. I said, all you had to do is just come talk to me. Hey, Pastor Scott, I thought you said this. And I would have been, oh man, you are so right. And so we had that talk. And I said, you're learning, I'm learning. But you're going to need to do this because you're going to be a ministry leader, because as soon as he moves on to go plant this church, I'm promoting you right up there. Matter of fact, why don't you come alongside of him and help him? And so it worked out great, but that was a faux pas on my part. So you want to write down the main points of contention, and so you stay on track, and steps for restoration. 4, try to get the best settings to have the conversation. Try to set things up so the conversation works best. Don't try to confront the person in a crowd unless it's absolutely necessary. Unless they're so rebellious, they're not going to even meet with you in private. They're causing a public commotion. Sometimes you have to do that, but it's rare. You really don't have to. Probably on maybe 2 or 3 occasions in 30 years of ministry have I ever had to do that. And that's in a very large community, very large church. So that's with tens of thousands of people. So it could be very rare that you're going to have to do that. And understand that one of the reasons why you don't want to do that is because emotions are running high, right? Don't confront or don't have this conversation when emotions are running high. Get your emotions under control. Now, sometimes when you're talking to the people, emotions come up, and that's natural because it's why we don't like confrontations. But if you start with them, they're already sky high, they're already in the clouds, and then you go from there, then things are oftentimes said that shouldn't have been said. If you're under control and you get in there, emotions pick up a little bit, which they can, you can bring them back down and deal with them. Sometimes it's appropriate because the person is just off the rails, and they actually were called to give strong rebuke sometimes. And you don't do that passively. You don't sit down like, like Deputy Dog. Remember old Deputy Dog? Woe is me. And he kind of had this long draw and stuff. You lose it. Sometimes you just have to say, look, I'm telling you, this is absolutely wrong. And I'm not going to accept it. And we're not going to accept it at church. We're not going to accept this behavior. And we'll talk about that in a minute. But emotions aren't evil unless you let them get out of control. And you also don't want to let it drag on. The best of settings means that you don't wait so long to talk to them that you leave them in kind of this hellish limbo. Don't go to a person and say, I have concerns. I need to talk to you. And it's really important. I need to talk to you, but next week, can you meet with me next week? And what is the person going to think? You don't want to leave that person go, oh man, the pastor's mad at me or this person or whatever, and that go a whole week trying to figure out what they did. Just tell them if it has to be longer and drawn out, goes, hey, let's talk about your ministry. I want to touch base with you. Okay, do you have any free time? And I do this with other people from time to time, and which is all true. So, but don't let them stew for days. Don't, that's just wrong. Even if they kind of deserve it and you're like, oh, they should, don't. It's just not right. Just not right. But what we do is we often put this stuff off because it's just so hard to deal with it. So number 5 is take action. Often leaders, spouses, friends, you just avoid this conversation. You just hope it's going to work itself out. And sometimes it does, and we'll talk for a minute why it would. But often if we leave it, it's to the detriment of the relationship. It's to the detriment of the ministry or situation. Don't jump in with 2 feet. Don't overreact like we talked at the first. But you can't let it linger forever. You must take action. When do you take action? How fast should you take? Depending on the situation. If it's serious, if it's really hurting other people, man, you're going to have to step in quickly. If it won't matter in a day or in a week, I've had people come. If you're in any kind of leadership or ministry or business owner, there's always people who come and complain about somebody. And to them, it's egregious. Oh, they said this, or oh, they did this, or oh, they're not folding the napkins right. And you've got to talk to them. They are so, rebellious. And you're like, really? Is it going to matter after dinner, after this outreach or whatever, if the napkins aren't folded the exact right way? Is it really going to matter in a day or in a week? And some of those things you can kind of let go a little bit longer. Oftentimes they'll work their way out. And oftentimes you'll have to sit with the person who's complaining and teach them how to mentor, how to lead, how to encourage. But if it's a hurt that's really needs mending, you got to go. If it leaves people or the ministry vulnerable, then you must act. You can't put it off. We had a situation where a family, just a neat family, they were serving in ministry and a bunch of brothers and sisters, and they fought like cats and dogs, man. They would rip on one another, and sooner or later, they would go too far with one another and hurt one another. And, it would be quiet, and you could tell that they were angry at their brother or angry at their sister. But I wouldn't get in the middle of that. I would just let them work it out, and slowly but surely things would work out, and they would mend the situation. They would always forgive one another, but this one time it spilled over into the ministry, and I had to go talk to him. And I said, you guys, I love you. You guys, you have this amazing family and relationship. You can fight like that and then just make up, and you get things all on the table. But sometimes when you do that, and it's happened in this situation, you've hurt some other people's feelings, and they've left the ministry because of it. And they were feeling bad already. They understood. They saw what happened. They just didn't know how to handle it. And so I told them, here's how you handle it. And then you call the person, you encourage them, you apologize. You tell them how your family situation is and that they didn't grow up in a family like that. Basically, there was 2 kids, a lot of age difference between them. So it was almost as if they were a single child. And it all worked out, but it spilled over when it started affecting other people and the ministry. Then I had to step in. 6, be willing to compromise when you can, when it's not important. But many times it is important. And at that place, you have to be willing to not compromise and even kick someone out who is not repentive or endangering the ministry or endangering people. This is one of the worst things you have to do as a leader. You know, if you own your own business, you hate firing people. You hate having to spank a kid and send him to the room. You know, you just hate to get to that place. But one of the worst things for people to do, especially in the church, is abuse authority or abuse people or both together. What do I mean by that? Well, like false teachers who come in. We had a guy who was all caught up, King James only, would come in, make a ruckus in our bookstore, make an issue of it in the hallways, would stop people when they were getting into their car to go home after church, would condemn them because of the Bible they were carrying. And we reasoned with this guy, we reasoned with the guy, and we talked to him. We had good Bible teachers sit down with them, and I sat down with him myself, and he just wouldn't budge at all and began to call us heretics and other things. And we were like, look, you need to go find a church that's King James only that you fit in and you're welcome there, but you've used up your welcome here. You're not welcome here anymore. People are complaining about you. You're harassing people. It's just unacceptable activity for any child of God to do this. And so you need to find another church. And that's hard to do, but sometimes you get those false teachers and you work with them, and they just won't, and they're causing division. And Scripture talks about that if you admonish a evildoer once or twice, by the third time that you send them away. You kick them out of the household of God. You're going to run into people with hidden agendas. They want to enrich themselves with a business or something like that. We've had those kind of people, and they're only there to promote their business. They don't really care about growing in Christ, their relationship. Otherwise, they would leave their business cards and their spiel at home, right? But here they are, before, during, after church, in the bathroom. I caught this one guy in the men's room, and here he is, and he's not leaving people alone. And I'm like, stop. They didn't come to church to hear your business agenda, your business investment, nor especially they didn't come to church and into the church bathroom to hear it. But he wouldn't stop. And so he said, take you and your business cards and you got to leave. I'm sorry. We've warned you a couple times now. There are people who come in with an agenda to split the church over doctrine, over personalities, over simple things like the colors of the walls. Yes, we've had that. People trying to get other people riled up because walls were painted teal when it used to be orange. I was thankful for the teal. I didn't like the orange. It was all these 70s colors and stuff. I thought the teal was it was beautiful. Great color choice. And they were going around trying to split the church on the color of what's on the walls. Oh my gosh. You're going to get wolves coming in, preying on people, either spiritually or physically. Those sexual predators and stuff. You have to have the conversation with them. It's a difficult conversation, but you got to step up and you got to say, That's not happening here. You're not happening here. And sometimes we are calling law enforcement, and they're going to cuff you and take you away. If it's that egregious, if it's a crime, yeah, you may have to do that to protect your sheep, to do whatever. That's a whole nother thing we could talk about when we get into counseling, but that you sometimes might have to do that. Well, we're Christians. You wouldn't turn them over. Yep. I'm willing to turn them over to protect the sheep. You better believe it. Yep. Then you need to be able to be that way too. But for the most part, the vast majority of times, you will be able to win a brother or sister over and redeem the situation and have that hard conversation. And half the time you get into that conversation, I'd say more than half the time, it's not nearly as bad as you thought. Not nearly as bad that people are like, oh, wow, I didn't even know that. Or, oh, I was kind of thinking the same thing. Or, oh, well, I don't want to cause a problem. I'm serving. I want to do what God wants me to do. And so I'm totally open or on board. And you're just like, whew, man, I'm so glad we had this conversation. They're like, we're so glad too, because I just felt the tension, and you need to get it over with, because you know what? Ministry is messy. It can get so messy because you got a lot of people who are in different stages of their walk, and a lot of good people. You just got to help them through it. And so sometimes we're called not to the field, but to the stable. Not to planting, but to shoveling. And so it can get very messy, but it's going to be that way. So just have these steps, plan it out, and the vast majority of times it's going to go really well for you. If you don't, then it could go really bad. So I hope this is helpful. It was so helpful for me when somebody took me under their wings and kind of sat me down and said, they didn't go through all these points, but they just helped me out with this and with a few of these points. And I've learned more since then. And so hopefully it blesses you, and that you too can just serve the Lord and be a blessing. Praise God. See you next week.
You have been listening to Leadership from the Cross with Pastor Scott Thom of Cross Christian Fellowship in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Check out Pastor Scott's ministry training school and his other radio show, No Other Doctrine, by visiting our website at crossfellowship.org. That's crossfellowship.org. Also, you can visit our Facebook page at Facebook.com/Leadership from the Cross.